Welcome to Tehnopol Science and Business Park. This is the largest in the region, and our purpose is to support world-changing tech entrepreneurship. International procurements hold a great potential. It's possible to scale as an alternative to regular business environment. So this is the reason why we're holding this event today here at Tehnopol. We will kick off with short introduction about INGO project by my dear colleague Katrin. After that, we'll have Susan Rendorf, who will talk about how to do business with United Nations. Then we will have a short coffee break, and after that, our dear partner, Hille Insberg from Proud Engineers, will come here and share her experience how to work with United Nations Development Program. 15 minutes to 1, we'll have Triinu Kallas here from the Embassy of Copenhagen, and she will share her experience and introduce what opportunities offers UN international procurements. At 1 o'clock, we will have short panel discussion, and it will be very interesting for me to understand how to stand out and be visible to the United Nations organizations. But without longer ado, I ask here my dear colleague Katrin Senkevitš, the head of project portfolio at Tehnopol, and she will introduce INGO project. Please, Katrin.
Hello, welcome from my side as well. My name is Katrin Senkevitš. I'm from Tehnopol. And I'm INGOs project manager, so very briefly I'm just introducing what we do within the project framework. The project actually started already 2 years ago and will last for another year and a half. It is funded by the Interreg Central Baltic program and brings together 4 partners. So we have Tehnopol from Estonia, we have RISE Research Institute from Sweden, we have Latvian IT cluster, and our lead partner, Business Tampere from Finland. So all these partners bring in the companies that form the INGOs network. And the main aim why we are here and why we're doing this project is to support SMEs in working with different international and intergovernmental organizations and NGOs via procurements, innovation programs, and other type of direct collaborations. And all this in an effort to lead into sales, grow your exports, or perhaps find new export markets through these procurement opportunities. What we do within the project. So our main focus is to raise awareness through different events. So we do seminars, online webinars, and on-site events such as this event today, where we focus either on different topics or different organizations to gain more knowledge, how to access the procurements, and if this is something that your organization can benefit. We also work with the SMEs that are in the INGOs network. We try to matchmake that they form consortia. Also, we can provide advisory and mentoring support, whether it's building legal framework or preparing bids. We also organize international procurement seminars or business missions with the aim to bring our companies, our SMEs, closer to the international organizations, to meet with them, to have one-on-one meetings. And this is all we do to make contacts, get new business leads, eventually that it will turn into sales. We also do, right now, currently are preparing this joint publication material that we send directly to the contacts that we have with different international organizations to showcase what companies we have, what value they bring, what problem they can solve. So this is a very quick and short overview. If you wish to know more, if you want to be in contact, then you can contact our INGOs project team. We also have a webpage where we will have information about our past events, recordings, training materials, information about upcoming events. And yes, I will be here throughout the day as well, so use the opportunity and reach out to me during the breaks or networking time, or send me an email and we can see what is it that you are looking for and how we can support or help during this project. But I thank you and I hope you have a good event today.
Thank you, Katrin. For the further keynotes, if you have questions, then please raise your hand, and my colleague Kristina will give you the mic, because as we are recording this session, it's very important that you would ask questions to the mic. How many out of all people in the room are Estonians? Majority. So you probably know that the Estonian state's budget is a bit more than 18 billion euros. But did you also know that the large procurement, the large NGOs procurement market forms a bit less than 20 billion euros. So it's basically the same amount. So this is will probably encourage you to be more active, to ask questions and understand that the potential is there. So I ask here Susan Drendorf, United Nations Global Marketplace Program Specialist. Susan will tell us how to do business with the UN from registration to tender participation. And please be active and ask questions later. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So, good morning, everyone. I hope that today is going to be very valuable for all of you. I think I also want to start off by thanking the organizers for giving us the opportunity to also broaden our supplier market for the United Nations. Today, when you leave, I hope that you also feel that this is not so overwhelming, this is not so bureaucratic, and this is not impossible. Because I've noticed that when they ask you to register, I actually asked them if they could ask you some questions, because that is always important for us to understand where to focus our presentation, what are the perceptions out there, and the word complicated, bureaucratic, complex, long was a repetition. But the good news is there was also many of you that said that was your perception, but you actually don't have any experience. So I hope that I can manage your expectations today in terms of what you can expect when you do business with the UN. For us in the UN, one of the reasons why we do these events is that we are consistently trying to find a bigger supplier market, to find suppliers that's closer to the areas where we need support. In this case, for example, in this region in Ukraine, there's many areas where there's all kinds of support that is required. And part of the sustainability in the UN is to also work with suppliers in particular regions. And to work with suppliers that have the potential but have just never really looked at the UN as a market. I also want to remind you that you are among friends. Several people have also tried to manage my expectations about the Estonians, saying that they're very reserved people. So if they don't ask questions, it's not you, it's them. So I want to say to you, this is a great opportunity for you to ask the questions. I don't think there's many questions that I've never heard. So please, this is the time. It's also a good time for you to share your experiences for those of you that has tried to work with the UN, because your neighbor will also benefit from that. And perhaps I can also offer you some sort of insight as to why it may have happened and how you can overcome it for the next time. So that was a short introduction in terms of what I would like for you to get out of this. So she's already mentioned my name is Susan. We don't have to bother with the surname. And I have been involved with the UN for the past 22 years. I have always worked in what they call in the UN an interagency environment. So that means that I've never been associated with only one UN organization, but always have worked in an environment where we were trying to encourage collaboration in the procurement area among UN agencies. And this is also the aim and the goal of UNGM. So UNGM stands for the United Nations Global Marketplace. And this, you will see throughout the presentation, is the place where you register your interest. This is the place where you look for opportunities. And this is also the place where there's an extensive knowledge center in terms of all kinds of processes. From how do you register, what is important, which are the different agencies. This is an invaluable area for you to actually go and find additional information when you leave here today. So when you look at the UN market, it is like all other markets. If you today want to extend your business to a neighbor country, to Finland, what do you need to do? You need to do market research. You need to find out, how are the way people are thinking, what is it that they need, what are the special things that you need to keep in mind. You have to think about potentially about laws and policies in a particular country, and it is no different with the UN. The UN is a client like any other client. And there are some things, because unfortunately, when you look at the UN, there's no such thing as the UN, because the UN represents many, many, many different organizations, which I will also show you. I'm going to tell you a little bit of what we buy and where do we buy it from. So I will look at some of the statistics that was already mentioned that will also give you some sort of insight as to what you are dealing with. Then, of course, I will tell you where to find the information. So, and also the presentation will be shared with you afterwards. We are fine with that, and the session is being recorded, so you can always go back if there was an area you wanted to have a closer look at. So when I say the United Nations, this is the United Nations. So here you will see that when you look at it, you have all these different big entities, and then from there are different areas. We have the funds and programs up here, where you have UNDP, that was already mentioned ever so briefly, where we will speak to a current supplier a little later. You have UNFPA, the World Food Programme that everybody knows, and UNICEF that everybody knows. But in this, you can also see that there are many other entities. And then you have related organizations. And here in this section, here you see that there are all kinds of other areas where you have like peacekeeping missions, etc., etc. And then you have all the specialized agencies. So these particular agencies have like a very clear mandate. They only do certain things, and that's what they do. While some of these ones under funds and programs, they often have a very wide mandate. So there you can find that an agency like UNDP, they can be involved in doing construction, they can be buying goods and services, they can be buying training, they can buy hotel services, very many different things. And so does UNICEF, for example. Although UNICEF also has a very clear mandate, and that's to take care of mothers and their children, they also work in a very wide environment. So this gives you some sort of insight as to how complex the UN is. So when people say, well, the United Nations always, then I think, well, it's probably not me, because there's so many other potential organizations that it can be. So what do we buy in the UN? Our major expense is that on health. And when I say health, then that includes things like vaccines. Like UNICEF is in essence the organization in the world that takes care of children's vaccines. All the vaccination programs in all the countries where the national government cannot, for one reason or the other, actually supply that service. This is one of the things that UNICEF does. A big other area is that of construction and engineering. And when I say construction, it involves many different things. It can vary from setting up a camp or some infrastructure for refugees, to building roads, to building schools, to building hospitals, to building prisons. It is really varying, and many things that falls under that particular area. Then we had food and farming. And here, under food, when we think about food, it's very particular things that World Food Programme buys. So they don't buy canned, well, not a lot, canned foods and biscuits and cookies. What they would be buying is grain and oil and wheat and flour and those kinds of basics from which you can start to provide food to people. And a big area in there is also the Food and Agricultural Organization, FAO. They also fall under that category. They buy seeds, they provide services, they teach people how to use equipment, how to plant, they help them to research the soil, etc., etc. Then you have administration and operations, and under this area falls all the consultancies. And in the UN, we do consultancies in two different ways. In some organizations, this is an HR project. So you're never going to see it advertised on the website on UNGM, but it would be a job. So you will go to UN Jobs and you will see that they are looking for somebody that will come and work in Rome on a project for 2 or 3 months. That is a consultant. But in UNDP, for example, they consider this process a procurement process. So one of the things that you will see on UNGM when you look at procurement opportunities, that there is a lot of opportunities for individual consultants, where it's somebody that has specific knowledge and experience and skills for a shorter term project. So that falls under this administration and operations. Then, of course, we have transportation and storage. So that is how we move products to who needs it. In many cases, the vast majority, when we buy something, we also want the supplier to take care of the logistics. But in some cases where it is in a country that is particularly complex, we will provide the agreement under which products can be moved. It also includes in this section all the transportation for peacekeeping staff all over the world. So when there's soldiers in a country present, how they are moved in and out of the country, how are things moved to those people. Then we have media and IT, and this is a very wide area. This can be, you will see also that in the UN, we have finally also realized how important marketing is. So you will see that there are opportunities for people to work in that environment, creating websites, understanding that that is a platform. that is used and that is important. We, of course, have our IT equipment that we use on a day-to-day basis. And then we have communication equipment, so what they are using in the refugee camps, for example, what they are using when people are in a wide area. Then we have travel accommodation and catering. And this is always one of those areas where, I think people must not think that this is what we do. But this is a part of what we do. I mean, for our own organization, we don't use this budget. But in some cases, that is necessary. So we do some travel, but post-COVID, that has also shrinked significantly because we've learned that you can actually do many things online. Then the utilities, we all have buildings and offices. Many of our partners also have buildings and offices. That is how we keep that. And then there's also a finance area. So for example, that each organization has a bank that they deal with that provides services to them, and we negotiate these things. And as it was mentioned earlier, in 2023, because we're always like 1 year late, because compiling these statistics, you can imagine how complex that is. So here it shows that in 2023, we spent $24 billion US. So where does the UN get its money from? From each of you that are sitting here and paying taxes. That's where the UN's money is coming from. So when you say that this is complex and bureaucratic, it's because we are looking after your money. Because the money that you pay in taxes are distributed by your governments and given for certain projects and programs that we have in the UN. And you can imagine that currently in the UN is not necessarily a fun time, because suddenly these funds have a totally different meaning, and we actually realize to what extent we really need to take care of these funds. So when we look at a period of 10 years, how the spend has increased and then decreased, you can see in essence we've had a continuous increase. And then we got to COVID, and there was a significant increase, which we sort of maintained, and then things fell down to a more normal, regular increase. The other area I want to let you notice, and actually this is not as clear as it is when you look, for example, over the past 20 years statistics, is that at one stage, the difference between goods and services, we bought the majority of goods. Now you can see that the services are, if not half, often more than the goods. This can also in some ways be a little misleading, because one of the things that we have now done is in the past you would just buy goods, and when you receive the goods, you would distribute the goods and you will use the goods. But now there are many different other elements that is included in it. Like we expect from our suppliers to also provide us, for example, with a plan of how do we dispose of goods after we have used it. So now it's not only goods anymore, it's now service as well. We also often now start to expect from our suppliers to provide some sort of training, for example. So if you have a system that we are buying from you, an IT system, we also expect that you will help us with the implementation and with the training. So suddenly, instead of just like delivering something, there is also an element of service involved. When it comes to, for example, vehicles, it's very seldom that we just buy a vehicle. We will buy a vehicle, and then we also need to ensure that that vehicle can be serviced, for example. So there would also be an expectation that in future you will have somebody in a country, that can also look after these vehicles. So then the distribution between goods and service becomes a little blurred. So where do we buy from? And what is important here to have a look at is when you look at the share of the UN procurement and you look at the size of this, you see the top 10 countries supply 38%, with the biggest one, the US, close to 9%. That always used to be around 6%. And here I have to warn you, because one always has to be a little mindful of statistics. Because one of the things that is happening with this particular statistic is that the way that we use the stats for this is the numbers that goes in here is where something has been invoiced. So this may very well have come from somewhere else. So it's not the manufacturer necessarily, or even the original supplier, but it was invoiced in that particular country. But that is mainly so confusing when you look at the US. It's also confusing when you start to look at Ukraine, for example, because there it is the same thing. It's not that suddenly there's so many more suppliers in Ukraine. It's how things are invoiced from there. But there are countries that really has learned how to do business with the UN. And one of them is Denmark. And I'm based in Denmark. And they actually have a number of headquarters and procurement departments in Denmark. So the Danish government understood the significance of having UN presence and then to also have the procurement presence in Copenhagen. So you will also see that UNICEF, for example, have their office there, and they also have their supply division. They have a huge warehouse from where they are doing the logistics for vaccines, for example, and for many of their products. Switzerland and Belgium and India, those three are so high because of the vaccines. So a lot of the medical products that we buy comes from those particular countries. And then, of course, you have, France and Turkey, and the UK that is more regular supply. So those ones are not because of necessarily the presence on where it is invoiced from. So what did we buy in 2023? We've already looked at the initial slide of what we buy in the UN. So this is just a repeat of it. But this gives you an idea as to just when you only look at pharmaceuticals, contraceptives, and vaccines, what a big portion of the total it is. So there you can see. And all this information that I'm sharing with you, you have available on UNGM. So on UNGM, there's an area that is called procurement statistics. And one of the organizations, UNOPS, they actually have the mandate to go and compile this information. So they have built a dashboard, and you can look at all the different countries that you would normally identify yourself with to actually find this information. But I will show you a little bit more about where you can find it. So this is a big overview of what we buy in the UN and some additional breakdown. So when you see areas like this, I'm just looking at other goods and services. When you think about apparel, luggage, and personal care, that looks a little strange. But these are, for example, uniforms for soldiers and additional equipment. But this gives you, and this also comes from the annual statistical report. So you can go and have a look at this and actually see where do you fit in and where are the potential for your company. When you look at these numbers and you see these huge numbers of billions that is spent in particular areas, it's very easy for a small and medium-sized business to think, okay, this is not for me. But I want to tell you that this is very much for you, because the vast majority of the purchases that we make is under $50,000. So it's not only big business that we do a lot of smaller contracts as well. And we actually really like to work with smaller companies because we know we are important to them. When you are working with a huge company, then you know that the interest that they have in the UN is often because it's good marketing for them. Not necessarily that they really want to provide you with a particular service and will go out of their way to adjust things to make it better for the UN organizations. So we really like to work with small and medium-sized enterprises. The other thing that is very good about the UN market is it's a very secure market. For example, when we do business with a supplier, we are not allowed to start the procurement on that process until the funding is secured. So we're not allowed to start with something in the anticipation that we will get it, and then we don't get it. We plan for it sometimes, but the actual procurement can only start when the funds are committed. So when you have a contract with the UN, then that contract will be honored, regardless of the situation that we find ourselves in. Also, and I know people who've done business with the UN may often say, but they're very slow to pay. We have a 30 days payment rule. And in the vast majority of cases, that is also done like that. But yes, sometimes there could be reasons why something goes wrong. The good news is we always pay. We always pay. We never get to the point where you have to take us to court. This is not in our interest, this is not in your interest, so ultimately we pay. So it is a good and secure market. And it is a good training ground for learning how to deal with difficult clients. So this is a good place for you to start and to have a look and gain the experience. Now let's look at I've looked at 4 countries, at Estonia, Latvia, Finland, and Sweden. So you can get an idea as to what it is that we are currently buying from here. So we have spent $11 million in 2023 on products and services where it was Estonian companies. I think we are 169 countries that we are currently buying from. So you are fairly down on the list. 17 UN organizations has procured from here. If you consider there's 31 big that makes up like 99% of what the UN buys is out of 31 organizations. Not all UN organizations have a big spend or are focused on buying things. Currently, there's only 276 Estonian vendors registered on UNGM. So hopefully after today's event, I will see a nice increase in that number. So you can also see it's fairly few. So it also shows that this is not a market that you are familiar with and Estonians necessarily actually look into. On the upside, if you look there, and actually I made a screenshot from the annual statistical report, and I realized afterwards that they have something that's a little misleading, and it's here. This total number of suppliers that is incorrect. It should actually say the total number of bids or tenders that Estonian suppliers have participated in. So that means of these 276, there's a handful of them that are super active, for whom they look at tenders on a daily basis, and they are also tendering and they are doing business with the UN. So that's why that number is so confusing if you think that there's less than 300 that are actually registered here. But also see here, can you see that there's a very nice increase in the business that is being done. So well done to all the trade promotion entities for introducing the UN, because we can definitely see the impact. So there's significantly more business being done. And this is what we buy from Estonian companies. So there's the laboratory and testing equipment, there's some engineering and research services, and there's also management and admin services, and under which there comes consultancies, for example. And then you see the top agencies that have been buying from Estonian companies. So UNOPS, the International Organization for Migration, the World Health Organization, they are falling into that laboratory and testing equipment. UNDP, that does a lot of work, very varied things that they buy. UNIDO, and then also UNICEF. But all this information, you can go and you can look at all the details. Then I have compared these 4 countries, so you can actually see who is doing more business than others. You can see that Finland had an exceptional good access to the UN market, but that has dwindled to basically to the size of Estonia's, while Estonia has had a steady increase. You can see in Latvia, it's very varying. So then it's high, then it's low, but it's not a lot. If you think that that is 12.5 million or something. So they are the ones that is, closest to what you are also buying. And then when you look at Sweden, there was a time where it was more than 400 million. And you can also see that there's a lot of goods. And that can also vary what kind of goods. Because there are times where we have bought a lot of vehicles, industrial equipment, sun energy, solar energy, so there's many different things. But when you go and you actually use the annual statistical report, you can also click on this, and then you can go and see what it was for that particular year. So they have an interactive dashboard, and it's a really valuable tool to do market research with. So I've also compared some other information in terms of 2023. So there you can see that Latvia and Estonia, so Finland was actually doing the poorest in this comparison with then Estonia and Latvia and Sweden. And Sweden, I also know that from all these years, that they also have a very active trade promotion program. So they also introduce their suppliers to the UN consistently. So there you can also see the number of UN organizations that is procured in the different countries, the ranking in the big total of where do you fall out of that 169, the percentage of the total spent. So you can also see that although Sweden spends significantly more, it is not that any one country owns the UN market. There's really very good access for all suppliers to the market. The number of registered suppliers, and when I did the stats last week, there was more than 500,000 suppliers registered on UNGM from 192 different countries. The number of bids that vendors are participating in, that is where you really start to see a difference, and also the relationship between the impact. Of course, your chances of winning a bid when you don't participate in a bid is very slight. So you need to actually start to participate in bids in order to have that opportunity and to get the experience. You will also, these numbers, I also just want to say, when you look at the total number of tenders, that total number is only the open tenders. Because later I will explain to you that we also have closed tenders. And I will explain why we have those closed tenders and how do you get access to those closed tenders. But what we can immediately see from our side in terms of data is we can see, the open tenders. The top categories from each country. So you can see I guess the nice thing here is there is not overlap. So you are not competing against one another. You each have your own area of expertise. And these are the top 3 UN organizations that's been buying from the different countries, with UNICEF, World Food Programme, and UN Secretariat being the biggest buyers in the UN system. So this is how you find the information that I have just shown to you. You can now see here that it's under the section of UN Procurement Service Statistics. You don't even have to log in to have access to it. You can go and you can have a look at it. There's also an email address to write to this particular team that manages it. They will also help you if you have a special request and you want to see some very specific information. But you can also see who are supplying the UN, which companies are supplying the UN. And that is a very valuable thing to know, because then you know who can you partner with, or you also know who's your competition. So there's a lot of information available there. Then the other place where you can go and you can find more information. So I've mentioned a couple of agencies already. I mentioned that they had specific mandates. So who do you find out which agencies are a good match for you? By going on to the Knowledge Center, also on UNGM, and then going to have a look and see, who are the different agencies that we have. So the ones that you can go and do business with, you can click on each of the icons, and then you can read a little bit. Where are they located? What is their budget? Do they have something specific? And we also have some procurement opportunities that are current that is also linked on those pages, although everything is together under procurement opportunities, the second heading there on your UNGM account. So lots of information. So now you know now where to find the information on where to start. So who's the UN, which agencies are of interest, which areas you think you can potentially contribute to, what is the spend, you know all of that. So what is the next step? The next step is the easy step, to go and register as a potential supplier. And something that is important here, and this is always one of those areas where I get a little anxious when people have a panel discussion that is called, how do I market myself to the UN? Because by nature, there we are also a little Estonian and thinking, perhaps not. It's more difficult for us, it's more difficult for you to market yourself to us. You have very few opportunities. But your registration is one of them. Why do I say that? Because when you look as a UN staff member and you get to a registration and you click on it and you can see, firstly, the name is all lowercase, they don't have a capital, then this was something that was just done quickly. Everybody's license number is 12345, the contact is AA and the surname is BB, and I'm also not sure about the phone number. That is not the impression that you want to create. Because this is the first place that a UN staff member will actually see your company. So there are certain things, take the time to make sure that the information that you are providing is correct. That you have your legal, it shows your legal name the way it is shown on your certificate of incorporation. That the contacts, the details and the email addresses, etc., is correct. Spend some time to actually look at the codes. So I will also talk a little bit about that more. So this is where you will get started. The United Nations Global Marketplace. One of the first initiatives that was done by member states in general and supported by the UN's General Assembly when it comes to procurement was, you should have one place for vendors to register, and it needs to be uncomplicated. In those days, when this was started, was the late 1990s already, one of the big issues that we dealt with was internet connection. So we had a process, but it was on the internet. You had to attach forms. It was very complicated, which meant that if you were in a developing country and you didn't have access to it, you already had a disadvantage. So one of the key things that we tried to do was to do the initial registration really simple. Today, we are not dealing with the same challenges anymore. But still, you know, this is our attempt to make sure. So whether you are a huge company or whether you have 2 employees, the process is exactly the same. So we also, from a huge company, will ask them to provide exactly the same information as we are asking from you. We have more than 500,000 vendors that are registered on UNGM, so that means that they actually have a registered status with one or more UN organization. We have many more that started a registration but never completed it, or still missing information that gives up, you know, through the process. We try and work with them also through trade promotion entities to complete their registration. Because until such time that you have a complete registration, your account is not visible to staff. Also, you cannot participate in a tender where there is a requirement to do it on an e-procurement portal. You can't access the tender. So very important that you start this process of registering before you start looking for tenders. Because when you do find the tender and you then see, okay, you have 4 days before this tender is due, so now you work on the tender, and on the day of the tender, then you're like, oh yeah, I have to do my UNGM account. Then you do your account, then we say, oh, we think this may be a duplicate. So this is going to take us time to do, and you have been warned when you were trying to register that we think that there is an account like this, and you just continue. So that means somebody needs to look at this account, has to release this account, or actually consolidate the account with the existing account. And then by the time all of that has happened, you may have missed the deadline. And that, I think, is one of the worst things that can happen for a vendor, because your frustration and our frustration is equal at that stage. So really, really important for you to finish the registration process. Ask for help if there are areas that you are uncertain about. So this is what our website looks like. We've actually relaunched a new look for it very recently, and we also have a new logo. So you will see, for those of you that are into detail, that some of the slides, I missed the new logo. So we have a new logo and a new site. We had lots of discussion about saying register with no cost, because there's also sometimes confusion, because we have a service, which I will tell you about later, where you do pay for it, but you don't pay to register. And if anybody in the UN asks you to pay for registration, then it's probably not the UN. There are also, unfortunately, a number of fake sites out there. So very important that you make sure that you are in the right place. So you go and you register. For you that are here, that are companies, you go and you join as a supplier. You register as a supplier. Not as an individual, so although you work for a company and you are a person, you actually register the company and not the person. You can add 5, 6, 7, 8 colleagues to the company account. So, you know, just make sure that you don't register in the wrong place. You will also see that there are some other areas where you can register as in different roles. So there's obviously one for staff members, so UN staff, procurement staff, they also have an account on UNGM, and they can see certain information that you cannot see. Then you have the trade promotion entities, like our colleagues over there. They can also have a registration, and they can also see information about suppliers in their particular countries. which helps them to help you. You can join as an individual consultant. There's a handful of agencies that use this process for that, but that is when you do not represent a company, because it's very limited as to what they can participate in. We are currently also working on a portal for implementing partners, which is something totally different, and then also for international organizations. So in addition to the UN organizations, we also allow international organizations, for example, Interpol, to join UNGM. So as long as the mission and the feel of an organization is very similar to that of the UN, they can request and gain membership. So what they get here is that they will also advertise their tenders. They do not have access to vendors in terms of seeing your information directly. They can ask for the information. So if you say we can share information, then we share it with them. But they advertise their tenders, for example. When you go and you register, one of the very first things that you are asked is that you need to acknowledge the supplier code of conduct. This is a very important document. It's very easy to go and just like click past it, because we don't force you to open it. But you should go and read it, because this is basically the underlying principles that we have for working with a supplier. So that you and your company, that you subscribe to the same principles as the UN, that you treat people with respect, that you have equal opportunities for male and female, that there are certain things that you will not do as subscribed by the International Labour Organization. There's no use of child labor. You ensure that the people that are working for you have contracts. They have freedom of association. You are not producing landmines. There are also some very specific rules in terms of how you deal with the UN. You're not allowed to give us gifts. We are not allowed to accept gifts. You're not allowed to pay us for our services. We're not allowed to accept those things. You're also not allowed to actually employ UN staff for a certain period of time. So if you get close to a procurement officer and they think, but I can help you because I know how there's specifications, that's a no-go. So there's a lot of information in here. And the thing is that when you do not adhere to this information and there is a dispute later, that this is where you can get sanctioned. And when I say sanction, it means that we will stop doing business with you. And we have a list in the UN where we have the information of sanctioned vendors. And when I say we, I mean all UN organizations. Because that is the policy framework that they have in place. So if World Food Programme is not doing business with you, then UNOPS will not be doing business with you, UNICEF will not be doing business with you. And for them to decide that they need to do business with you in any event is a major process. So it's really, really important to ensure that you read this and that you adhere to this. Then the actual registration process is very straightforward. I always say, I think the only part of information that you don't have at the time of registration may be your license number. The rest of the information that we are asking you is really very general. It's also important to keep in mind that you need to use an actual email address. So don't go and say, supplier@ungm.org, because there's no email address like that. We will send you an activation link, and then it goes to something that is incorrect. And you won't get it, and you can't create an account. So very important to do that. Also, when we warn you about a duplicate, please don't continue, because we will have to check it, and it delays the process for you as well. And then you will need to click the button, and we will send you the activation link to the account. So basically, this is what your form will look like. You will then see that you have like the section with the vendor and the dashboard. From here, you can see a lot of information. So also go and explore. You can't break it. So go and click on all the links. Go and see where you go when you say, manage my account settings. There, for example, you can change the language for your account. So you can also look things up in different languages. You can manage a lot of things. You can add your colleagues. You can always, after you've done your registration, go and edit different sections. So you can go and edit the general information, like make sure that you have the correct license number, the correct number of employees. You can add contacts. You can also remove people when they leave. Then the area that I also want to say that you need to spend time on is under that goods and services section where you select the codes. Because the codes is what the UN staff use to find suppliers. It's also what we use when we match a vendor with specific tenders. So it's really an area where you need to focus. And we've even added a little box that counts the number of codes that you select, because often people go at the top and they just like take the big category and then they've added 2,045 codes, and you know the chances of you actually providing each and every item is slim. So very, very important to, and this is again the business card, you know, show that you have attention to detail, that you are taking care of this information. And then once you are done with that, actually we do an auto submission. So when your account is complete, we automatically submit your information to the organizations that are registered for the codes that you have identified. So that way we make sure that their vendor database have relevant vendors in, and that you only see those organizations that you potentially can do business with. So again, a good reason why it's important to look at that. And then we also have, and some of you that have an account may have noticed, we have different levels of accounts. So I've just told you this is 10 minutes, one thing that you may not know from the word go. The others are a little bit more complicated, because there we will ask some information about a reference, for example. We will ask you to upload your certificate of incorporation. We will ask the details of directors, for you to explain, you know, which are your affiliates, etc., etc. And then in level 2 is where we start to ask you about financial documents, letters of reference, etc. Do not panic. The vast majority of tenders do not require these additional levels. The vast majority requires you to be registered at basic level. It is good practice to go and do that level 1, because that helps the procurement officer to actually look at the account, and already they can see certain things about this vendor. And this is also, you know, a little extra information that is easier to select the vendors that has a level 1 registration for a closed process than the ones where you're not really sure about all the details. These additional levels also is an indication of the monetary value that they anticipate for a contract. So when you see something where there is a requirement for a level 2 registration, so they are asking you for your financial documents, and they are asking you for reference letters from clients, then you must know this is a big contract. This is a high-risk, big contract. The smaller ones, they can do with the basic information. Also, 88% of the vendors that are registered on UNGM are small and medium-sized enterprises. So that should also encourage you that you are in good company. You know, it's not only the big companies that do business with the UN. You will also see that you have a dashboard from one of those links. Go and look at the dashboard. At the dashboard, we give you some ideas where we have matched tenders with the codes that you have provided. So you can go and you can have a look and see what are the details, what it is, how many alerts are there, all kinds of additional information is provided there. So own this account. Don't just make it and then never check back. Use the information, use your account. I've already mentioned that you can actually also go and you can edit all the information. And then these three things that I want to highlight again that I have already said. The importance of providing your name, your company name, as the legal name. There's also a field that says for doing business as or where you can put in your trade name, but your legal name is very important because that is the name that they will also use when you need to be paid. And if you haven't done it at that stage, then you will have to do it later, and then it's just more complicated. So very good to do that. Important to keep it up to date. One of the things that we spend a lot of time and effort on in UNGM, we have a help desk with 2 people that's constantly looking at emails, is adding contacts to an account. Because the person that originally created the account has now left, so you start to create a new account, it warns you about the duplicate, either you ignore it and continue, or you have to reach out to us and we add you to the account and you have access to it. So really important to keep it up to date. And then to log into your account regularly. So why do I say that? Because as a procurement staff, when you start to look for suppliers, you want to know that this supplier is actually still considering doing business with the UN. Because procurement staff have some basic rules and requirements that they need to meet in order to have a procurement process. And one of them is that they need to have a minimum of 3 bids that are compliant. So that is the minimum. In the vast majority, our agencies are told that they need at least 6. And depending on the kind of contract, it may be a higher number. So if they are inviting somebody and now nothing happens, it can often be because that account, nobody is locked into it. So now they have requested us to actually show them when last has a vendor locked into an account. So they can see which vendors had locked into an account in the past 6 months, because that is an indication of whether that vendor is still active or not. So important for you to log into your accounts on a regular basis. Don't just leave it there. We also, on our help center, have extensive information in terms of how to register. Where we have, you can see there, so you have the button to the help center. You can see there's different areas, so you fall under prospective suppliers and individuals, and then you can go and see there are different areas here. So what do you want to do? Do you want to get started? Are you setting up an account? So that's what we want to do. We want to set up an account. We can also, look at accessing it. How do I change my password? How do I add a contact? The managing of the account, how do you complete everything? So I've selected that one, completing the registration at basic level. And here are some of the articles. And here's an article also about how to select the codes. So there's a lot of additional information that you can find on the help center to help you. And if all else fails, then you can also write to our help desk and we will also support you. So now we have done all the important, the initial things. We've looked at the market, we've registered. So where do we find opportunities? So on the site, so even before you are logged in, you can see the opportunities, the public opportunities. Closed opportunities you won't be able to see here. But also you may not be able to participate in an opportunity if you are not logged into the account. Because you need to be logged in to go to the e-tender portal that is associated with a specific tender. But from here, you can see the basic information. This view that you are currently seeing, this view is a view for somebody who has bought the UNGM Pro package. So it's a tender alert service. And I just want to show it because this is actually really valuable. It costs $300 a year to have this. We also, I think they have a shorter period if you subscribe by credit card, but otherwise $300 a year, and they have campaigns as well. In any event, so if you do have it, there are certain things you can do that I think is really valuable. Like you can save a search. If you know that there are specific projects and countries that you are looking for, where you think there would be opportunities, you can actually use all this criteria that you have here and actually find that particular tender. The most important one would be here under goods and services. So that is where you would say what it is that you can provide, and then you will search. This morning when I logged in, I could see there was more than 1,300 notices on the site. So that has a lot to do if you're not using the criteria properly. So it's important to find a way that you can actually search it effectively. I also want to give you another tip. When we were talking about, getting to know the market, one of the things that you can do is if you unclick this date, you clear the dates, and you unclick this only current active tenders, you will see all the thousands of tenders that we've had in the life of the UN. So how can that be valuable? If you take the dates and the current away and you use that search codes section, you can, for example, go and see what did we buy in the past that falls in your category, and what did the tender look like? Because there you will have obviously you can't participate in the tender, but you can see the documents. You can see how they were written, you can see what was required. So that gives you an opportunity to go and see how we ask for things and what we have asked for in the past. Because one of the areas that could also be difficult for a new supplier is the way in the UN, as we are encouraged and forced to work smarter and more efficient, it also means that we are not necessarily tendering every process anymore or every service. We do a long-term or a blanket agreement that will cover us for a few years with one supplier, which means that it's more difficult for you to get into the market. But this can help you to be prepared, because you can actually go and see when last did they have a tender like this. And when you can see it's more than 2 years, the likelihood of this coming soon is there. And they have to, at least, even if they have the intention to maintain their current supplier, they often have to also put this out to tender. So this gives you a lot of additional information. Then, and this is where I actually thought, to do something where my daughter is a school teacher, and she's like, don't do new things. Well, this, I think, could be one of those moments that I want to say to you, you can actually look at your mobile phone. And if you go to UNGM and you go and look at procurement opportunities, you can go and see what happens when you actually click on an opportunity. And you can see where all the additional information is. So you also have here the documents. You have the contacts. That contact is the email address of the office or the person who is the contact for this particular tender. So when you have a question about a tender, about whether you can do something differently or you don't understand what this means, you don't write to UNGM. This is the person that you write to, this person here under contacts, because they are the ones that's dealing with this tender. You also have some links under these links. It could be a link to a document, for example, that you have to complete. One of the areas where you see this often is for UN Secretariat in the expression of interest They link to a document that you then have to print out, complete, and email back to them. But it can also be a link to e-sourcing, for example, or e-procurement portal. And then it also provides you with the codes. So very good for you to also go and have a look at these codes when you do a look at a tender and see if this was something that was relevant for you. Make sure that you're also using the codes that the agencies are using, because that shows you how they are thinking about this particular product or service. So lots of information that is available from here. Before I move on with this section, I also want to say that one of the key competencies that you need to work with the UN is your ability to read. So read the details. Read it several times. Make sure that you actually understand what it was that they said. And if you are not clear, to ask for clarification. You know, and also when you ask for clarification, the other thing that you need to keep in mind is that when we respond to you on your clarification, we have the duty to also raise that question to others. And usually you will see on a tender, you may have an additional tab that says revisions. And in that area, they may actually publish the questions and the answers that they've gotten during the process. So when you ask your question, it shouldn't be giving away your secret, because they will be sharing that answer with everybody. But ask, you know, much better than to do the wrong thing and spend so much time and energy on it. Then the other thing that is important to note, when you look at the procurement opportunities, you will see, and now I also have to admit you won't see that today, because I discovered a bug. Today, all the buttons are blue. Also for the agencies that it's not supposed to be blue for. The guys will fix it. So tomorrow this problem will hopefully be solved. So that's why I was also thinking, you know, I want to ask you, but perhaps I don't want to ask you. Usually you will see some buttons are gray and some are blue. So what does that mean? When you have a gray express interest button, it means that that particular agency is not integrated with UNGM. So when you click on that button, it doesn't take you anywhere. And there's actually a message that also comes up to say, we are not associated with the e-procurement portal, please read the instructions. So that means that you need to go and have a look and see how do they want you to actually submit this tender. While the blue buttons, when you click on them, then it actually takes you to the portal. For FAO, for WHO, for example, they use a portal that is called Intent. Some others use a portal that's called Jõeäär. UNOPS actually use something that's called e-sourcing. So you have all these different ones. So those are the electronic submissions, the ones that is in blue. So I have a couple of recommendations when you are participating in tenders. We have already covered the importance of market knowledge, of ensuring that you have suitable products and services. And here, one of the areas that is often very difficult for suppliers is they have something that is new and innovative and really special, but then they don't see requirements for that, because the needs that we need to meet in the UN is often the very basics. So it can make it really complicated to come with something that is totally new. You need to have an experience. So then you have a startup company saying, so what am I doing here? Well, yes, we want experience, but if it is something that is of smaller value, where we feel the risk is worth it, we will also work with small companies that are new and doesn't have long experience. Competitive prices. I saw one of the comments from the sheet was like, you don't give a budget. Yeah, because we know, then you will be €1 less than the budget. So we don't provide a budget. You need to come with your best price. There is no negotiation. So you have to come with your best price from the word go. And we will also talk a little bit about how does this work. Then networks and partners, we don't have any preference whether you work on your own, whether you work in a consortium. We don't have a preference. At the end of the day, we will sign contract with one entity. So that is just something that you also need to be clear about. It is important that you have the staff and the financial capacity. Because one of the other things that we don't do, unless it is a really, really huge project, we may have payments based on milestones. But usually we pay at the end when we have received it 30 days from there. So that obviously can also be a restriction if you are a small company. So something to keep in mind. But the terms and conditions are very clear as to what you can and what you can't. Important for you to also have the intercultural skills and languages. It is a struggle when you want to participate in a tender, but you are only comfortable in submitting it in French, when the requirement is it needs to be in English. So very important that you also have the skills in your group that you can actually do this. Flexibility and accuracy, and I think flexibility probably now more than ever in the UN, because we have to do things in a different way with less money. So you need to be able, and it's also important for us to get to a point where we feel that our supplier is also our partner in terms of finding solutions and better solutions. So we are also open to suppliers coming and saying, you know what, this is not the best solution. You know, for a price that is very similar, you should probably also consider this, that, and the other. Also understanding that when you do something like that, it means that the procurement process has to be done over, right? Because we cannot in the middle of something make a change to a process and not everybody can benefit from that particular process. Then finally, persistence and patience. Lots of that. We once did at a similar kind of event for a country or countries that are very used to working with the UN. And they said that it took them on average 6 attempts before they got to the point where they felt, okay, fine, you know, this is something that we can do. So this is not necessarily on the first round that you are successful. So having said all of that, let's look at the principles of procurement. So some of the things is, one of the first things is the best value for money, which is not the equivalent of the cheapest. It is the best value for money. So it's not only the price that we look at. We also obviously look at the quality, but it is a very important part of your tender. Fairness and effective competition. So that means when I say fairness, that all suppliers have equal opportunity. And that is where it becomes very difficult when you say, you know, if only I can meet somebody that's, you know, buying this, and, you know, if I can only have a meeting with that person, or can you give me the name? Because if you want to be fair, then you need to make that opportunity available to all suppliers. And then we won't be buying anymore, we will be meeting. So it's really, really important to keep that in mind as well. Then what is in best interest of the organization? So obviously for the UN organizations, there's many things that they need to keep in mind in terms of how they spend it, what is the impact on the people that they are working with, and also what is the impact on the reputation of the organization. Then integrity, accountability, and transparency. So that is why we are sharing the question that you asked, why we are sharing the answer with everyone. This is, you know, also why we have a commitment to you that when we have entered a contract, that we pay on time, that we don't make it difficult for you, expose you, you know, to your bank or something by paying late and, you know, causing problems for you. The first document that you will also have when you look at a tender that you need to keep in mind is the general terms and conditions. And here I want to tell you that it's our way or the highway, literally as unkind as it sounds. There is no way we are negotiating it. Because when we start to negotiate it, it means that we have to go to legal, you have to go to legal. By then we can find somebody else that accepts the terms and conditions, and that is who we deal with. You can go and have a look at the documents. They are associated with all the different tenders. For the vast majority of times, they are more or less the same for the agency. Sometimes there's a tiny little difference. So again, you need to read the documentation. There may be slight changes, but they are very similar. What does the procurement process look like? Here you get an idea, and the ones in blue is where people are on UNGM to do it. So the procurement process will start by the planning. What is it that we need? Why do we need it? Who are our partners with the UN for why we are going to implement a program, and what is it that we need to buy for this? Then they will do the requirements. And here it really varies as to how good the requirements are, and I have to admit that. Because I also hear from suppliers, and I also see things where I'm like, times have changed, this is not necessarily the most effective thing to buy anymore. But these are humans that are doing a job, and they, but this is also where you have the opportunity to influence and to educate. Then they source from UNGM. So they come onto UNGM, they use the codes, and they look at suppliers that are available. And then they have to start to decide what kind of process are they going to use. And I'm going to show that to you in a second. Then they have the bid receipt and the opening process. This is not something they use as often as they used to. But if they offer that, this is such an important opportunity for you to have insight into the price of other suppliers. Because at a bid opening, they literally open the bid, they read the name of the supplier, and they give the amount that was bid. So this is the only opportunity that you will ever have to hear what another company has bid. If you cannot participate in the opportunity, you can always ask your embassy to participate on your behalf. So that is also allowed. But a very important thing. Then they will go into the evaluation. I will also tell you what it is that they look at that. Then the review and the award. Therefore, there they come again onto UNGM and they add the information on UNGM. So when a UN staff member comes and they look at the supplier profile, they can actually see the information. Then they have the contract finalization and issuance that happens outside of UNGM, apart from one organization, where they take the information from your UN account, where it's really important that your legal information and your address is correct as it's on your bank statement, because otherwise it delays the payment process. Then they do the logistics and they do the contract management again within UNGM. So the factors that influence us when it comes to finding a supplier. The price. Obviously, we want to have a good and competitive price. The nature of the goods and the services. There are some things where we are very set on you having international standards. In essence, when you are selling products and services or products that can potentially kill and harm people. So there, of course, there are other things that are not so important to us. But for certain things, that is very important. The market conditions, we also recognize that sometimes we have to do things in a different way because the market works in a different way. When it comes to vaccines, for example, there they have a totally different way of doing it, where they have an open book principle, where all the suppliers know what the other suppliers are charging, so they cannot start to influence the market because that is a critical market. We cannot have that kind of competition in that market. Critical dates for delivery. Obviously, when you have a humanitarian crisis and people are in need, we are not going to start a long process. There we may be able to actually do emergency procurement or do what they call direct procurement. But those are few and far in between. The rules are very, very strict. Because if we did that all the time, it would not be fair. And that is one of the very first principles of how we do procurement. So that, then also one of the areas that you will see, and actually when you go on UNGM and you look at procurement opportunities and you scroll, you would see most of them are just text, and then occasionally there's one that has a little green symbol next to it. And it means that those particular tenders have sustainability criteria. And this is something that you will see increasingly, because there's a lot of focus on this. And a lot of the arguments in the past that if you do that, then you exclude many suppliers from developing worlds, or, from developing countries, or, you make it difficult for certain groups of suppliers, those arguments are disappearing. So there is a strong movement towards ensuring that there's some sort of sustainability criteria. And when I say sustainable criteria, I am not only talking about the environment. I'm talking about gender diversity, about buying closer to where the need is, economic stability, many different areas. And you will see there's a lot of information on the site about that as well. So the different kinds of sourcing exercises that we have. You have an expression of interest, or something that is called a request for information, or something that in some organizations are called pre-qualification. I want to tell you that this is really important to focus on these areas. Often when you think about it, you're like, I'm not going to fill out this form, I'll wait for the tender. No, not a good idea, because this is how we decide who we are inviting for the tender, is through these three methods. And this we use when we are working with goods and services where there's a lot of competition. This market is you can pick and choose who you want to work with. So here we put in some basic criteria so we can already make a shortlist. And then we say, okay, we will invite the top 20 from this particular group. So important not to ignore these particular opportunities. Then we have other areas that it depends on what it is that we are buying. Right, so we can have a quotation. So you may see that there is a request for a quotation. And you would think, so where's the bigger part of the process? It is when we are buying something where the money is, and this varies in terms of organization to organization, but where they say, okay, fine, if you are spending less than $50,000, then please don't have a big process, just ask for a quotation. And then you will see, there's a quotation for a hotel that can offer 4 nights of accommodation, or for 3 or 4 laptops, or for 1 vehicle, or, those kinds of things where it's not so complicated. Then you have the invitation to bid, and that is what we use for goods. So very simple, straightforward. You have a form where you say, this is the good, this is the unit price, this is the total basic information. There's no consideration for training or any of these other services. It's only goods. The more complex ones are the ones that's called a request for proposal. So there, in essence, we ask you sometimes for goods and a service. So that will be one part of it. And then we ask you for the financial bit in a different envelope. So here, again, very important that you actually read the details when it says RFP, a request for proposal, because the way you need to submit the documents is different to how you would do for the ITP and how you would do for a quote. Some of the other measures that we do, this morning I saw there was a blanket agreement, for example. A blanket agreement or a long-term agreement is the same thing. So that is where we have an agreement with a vendor that has gone through the whole process of a tender. Sometimes it's not only one supplier. Sometimes we can say, okay, for this service, we will have 3 suppliers. And depending on when we need what, we will do like a mini bid with these suppliers, and one of them will actually get the contract. So this is a way that we eliminate a lot of the admin of the procurement job. So when there's something that we do or something that we buy on a regular basis, we use these agreements. So those are for things like vaccines, contraceptives, foods, IT equipment, and many other services as well. So, that's what we mean by that. Then you have direct contracting, where you buy something directly from the supplier. Because that supplier is the only supplier that can supply this. There's no point in going to the market with this because it is nowhere else. And there are actually, believe it or not, a few items in the world where there is one supplier for it. But it also needs to be documented very, very well. So it's not our preferred method of procuring. And then we have emergency procurement procedures. So when something is a big crisis, then we shorten the process. We can often go back to suppliers that we've worked with in the past without going through a big process. Again, it needs to be documented very well. But you will see, these are the terms that you will see. So when it is an open tender, and those are the ones that you see on UNGM when you just go and scroll, this is open to everybody. When you have a restricted or limited, that is the results from the expressions of interest, the request of information that we've had in the very first slide under this section. So those are the vendors that we are then approaching. Or when it is a group of vendors that are very specialized. But that is also not necessarily recommended. They're quite strict about that. And there you won't see it there, but when you are logged into your account, there's a section that says My Tenders. And there, if you were selected for a closed tender, it will be there. But they will also write to you directly. Why it is important to use the right email address? They will write to you and say to you, you can potentially offer this product. Are you interested in participating in this bid? And those are the closed or restricted ones. So how do we evaluate it? Already said, and you will see price, price, price. But when it comes to the request for a proposal, there we do it differently. Because there we are often asking for a solution to a problem. And there we evaluate the solution before we evaluate the price. So, only when we think that the solution is good, we will open the price envelope. If we don't think the solution is good, we are not allowed to open the price because we don't want to put people in the situation where now they're like, yeah, that is a lot, but that's a really good solution. Let me see. And then you look at the financial and you're like, oh, yeah, this one is half the price, so perhaps we can also live with less. So it takes all of that away. So you never have to worry about that. If it was that it is not accepted, it was because the combination of the solution and the price wasn't ideal. And there they will also very often give you a list and say, these are the things that earns you the most points. For example, if you have to have a team that does something, they will tell you, people with an experience in this area for so many years, so many points. For years of experience in this field, so many points. So you can also go and see where they are going to emphasize when they do this. So, as I said, they will be clear about what do they do it. So here when we look at some things that I want to highlight in terms of submitting, I've already said to you the importance of having your UNGM account. Something else that is important is that if you are invited to bid, Let them know if you can't. Because that way they know that you are in the market, you are interested, but just now you cannot. Instead of thinking, okay, this was an email address that's no longer in use, or they are not interested. So this is also a way for you to build a little relationship. Read the documents really, really carefully. Ask for clarification, as I said already, from the contact on the tender documents. Ensure that you meet all the requirements, because the moment you don't meet all the requirements, that bid is not complete and is thrown out. Read the technical specifications carefully, and you have to meet the minimum requirements. But this is often a good place to also highlight and market something in addition. For example, if you have a product with a minimum requirements, but you also have something that could potentially do the same job, but is slightly more expensive, you can also add that as an option. And that is a way for procurement staff to also see that there is an alternative, perhaps. So next time, we will do the requirements in a different way. Sometimes they have found things that was really remarkable and decided, okay, fine, we'll redo the procurement process and actually ask for things in a different way so we can also consider this type of solution. So when you participate, I mean, the thing here for me is, for example, prepare to facilitate the work of the procurement officer. So think about how you put those documentation together. Are things separated? Is there a little thing on the side that says, okay, this is the offer, this is the standards, these are the certificates, these are the CVs, or is everything just in one envelope? It is so much easier for everybody to get an overview. And again, we get back to the business card. This is also an opportunity for you to show your attention to detail. That you also think about how you present yourself by how you present the actual tender. Another area where we are, just like with the general terms and conditions, where it's our way or the highway, is the deadline. There is no mercy when it comes to the deadline. Because again, it is the fairness. If somebody else could make sure that their tender is on time, then not even if you were struggling with getting UNGM and you were still waiting for somebody to clear the duplicate account, or you couldn't get in because there was something that wasn't working and you haven't seen that earlier, none of this matters. Really, really important that you have access in your account, that you have tried to get to the e-tender procurement. If you are using, for example, a courier to deliver a document, and he decided to park too far, and then, now he's 2 minutes late, gone. So make sure that you have enough time. There's no reason for you to also leave it to the last minute, right? Because when you have it ready, just put it on the system. Then you avoid that as well. Finally, we published the contract awards. Let me just go back there. So here you can see the contract awards that's been published. I have to admit, on behalf of many organizations, they don't actually publish it here. But you can see it in the annual statistical reports. And it is in your interest, if you have a contract with a UN organization, to tell them that you want them to publish it. So tell them you want to publish it. Or tell them that you would be open to a long-term agreement that can be shared with other organizations. Because that's also something we can do. So again, take ownership, not only of your account, but also of the relationship that you have if you have a contract with the UN. Because when another staff member comes and they look at something, then they can also see. And then finally, we have this tender alert service that I told you about earlier. You can also choose not to have it. It's entirely up to you. But this is very valuable because it will actually advise you of a matching tender at the time that the tender is published. If you have interest in doing business with the UN and you say, okay, fine, but I will check it every Monday, I will check the tenders. Yeah, that is all well and fine. But if the tender came in last week on Tuesday and is now due tomorrow, then that opportunity is missed. So this could be a good place to invest in having this. You can save searches, which is really valuable. You can also save or make quick links to the tenders that you are interested in when you have this service. Then the UNGM Help Center, I already showed you where you can get the information when it comes to the registration, but you can also find a lot of additional information. So information about how do you tender, what are the good things to remember, etc., etc. So use the Help Center. And then if all of this fails, you will also see on our Help Center, if you couldn't find an article that helped you, that you can create a request to our Help Center. And there, we are happy to help. We have a very good reputation for actually responding, unlike many UN organizations that don't respond. So we will always also try to point you in the right direction, help you to escalate an issue, for example. If somebody is not coming back to you and you have tried many times or you're struggling with something, we can always try and help you with that. So that was me. So now it is you. So all the burning questions that you have had, this is your time to ask them. Yes.
I'm Anu Molnarits from Visionist Institute, and we have participated in so many procurements, but with no result. And I was the one writing you about the budget. So let me tell the story from the small and micro companies' point of view. So let's say that you have a procurement, we are interested in it. To prepare bid documents, if you have individual consultancy, maybe it takes you like some hours. If you have request for proposal, the bigger contract, you say that it's more than 50,000 euros. It's about teamwork, and it takes you about between 60 and 100 hours. I'm a training company, okay?
Yes.
And I have and in a training, you know, we can be quite different. We can do things in a cheaper way, or we can actually try to make sense of all what we provide in different countries. Okay, so this is the investment we do. Everyone stops working with other projects to just place the bid. We get the reference letters, we get all the documents. Sometimes we supply them twice or even 3 times because the system is so complicated that even the procurement people don't find. And then we get clarifications, and everyone is told that we have 3 days to answer, exact timeline. At the beginning, it was different to understand what time. Then we understood that it's New York time. So trying to count when it's here in Estonia. So when we do supply, okay, we did it, no problem. And then the project deadline was in October. The project was supposed to start in December. Okay, good. Guess when did we get the answer about the project?
January?
Yeah, we get it last week.
Yeah.
So it means that I have a team of 15 persons lined up because the project was start to be in December. Everyone has booked exclusively time for this project because this was a requirement. One of the documents, amount of papers most probably were like, I don't know, 50 pages to be signed from different persons. In Estonia, we use digital signature. Everyone who asks us to sign something by hand or scan just drives us crazy because we know that you are not reading our digital signatures.
Absolutely.
So congratulations. All over the world was signing the documents, picturing with the phones in the bedrooms because we don't have scanners. Everything is digital. So we did it. And then the result was what? You are too expensive. Okay, I don't know who won. I don't know what was the price for the tender, what they have been winning. Do you think I will do it next time?
No.
Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely, and I can totally
take my message. If they want us here to really participate, they have to be open. The deadlines, not only for us, we are following them, but deadlines for your organization.
Absolutely.
You have to tell us, is it going to cost 50,000 euros or 100,000 or a million? And I will make my choice. For 50,000 euros in Estonia, our bidders ask for 3 comparative. Just comparison. We are not supplying 50 pages of hand-signed documents.
Absolutely.
And this is the comparison where our societies are currently, we would love to work. We really would love. But with this time and energy investment, I always think that if I have something better to do, I don't. And the problem is, we are not learning from this because we don't get feedback from you. We don't understand what was mistake. Yes, the quality was highest, thank you. But if you don't tell us what was the price, what is the recommended level, we have a choice to do it, but now we are sitting in a darkness. We have done it so many times, and I'm not sure that I will happily find time for the next time.
Yeah.
Susan, if Anumal would have written to the officer and asked for specific feedback.
They are not answering. You don't get it.
Yeah, and that is terrible. And that's when I really hate being here.
Sorry.
No, but it is so good to hear it, because this is how not to do procurement. So what do we do when we have a case like that? When you have asked and you don't hear anything, feel free to write to me at the registry email, and I will help you to escalate it, because one can also complain about procurement. And on our website, we have a section that says complaints. So every UN organization has a place where you can go and you can complain. Because this is not how things should happen. And we are very aware that, when you have a vendor that spends the time, in the perfect world, how that would work is that you will get the feedback. They will tell you that it is the price. So next time you can use a lot of the same documents and don't have to redo everything, which helps you to sort of have a package prepared. But I can understand from your face that that's not the case.
For the first, we are in services. We can never we always have tailored approach, so we cannot have, maybe recommendation letters I can have prepared. For the second time, this has happened in 100% of cases. It's 10 out of 10 happens. And I never complain because I don't want to ruin the relationship with the procurement team.
You also don't have a relationship now, right? So you may as well now.
But you have obligation.
But we can absolutely. No, unfortunately not. We don't have an obligation to give feedback. But when you ask for feedback, we have an obligation to give feedback. And that is where I found in the past, when a vendor gets so desperate and they escalate it, and we write and we copy their boss on this email saying, can you please explain? That then it happens. But then, of course, you do run the risk that you have a human on the other side that's now not wanting to work with you in future. But if you participate, the process is open. They cannot ignore your bid, because the process, the things are in place that everybody would see it, and it's never one person. We are required to have at least 3 people, that evaluates a bid, plus people that are technical experts. So it's not a decision that can be taken by one person. So from that point, I can tell you, yes, you may really annoy them, but hopefully they also learn something from it. Because for me as a person, it's also about the disrespect. Mm-hmm. Not understanding enough of the supplier community, the time and the effort that has gone into that, and for you not to have the very basic respect to say, I'm sorry, but you didn't win this, the price was an issue, and you can, for example, say it was 15% over the closest. Mm-hmm. You know, so I'm sorry that that has happened to you, you know.
So do I understand correctly that when you get a complaint, then you have obligation to reply to the complaint?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so
yeah,
better to give feedback. Yeah, I understand.
Yeah, you don't want the apology, you want information.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, this is also, it's not in the interest of the UN to work like this, right?
Yeah.
So this is where it becomes very complicated.
But we can actually help you to become more digital.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay, yeah, we have another question.
Hi, hello. And let me be the first to thank you for a very detailed and very thorough presentation. It was a great help. Thank you for it. So just to follow up a little from Anumal's question here, just to give you a comparison, I don't know, you probably know, but here in Estonia and in Scandinavia in general, we have been accustomed to get the full feedback, which means who participated, how many tenders there are, what are the points of the technical part and the price part, what were the general price, and I have experienced like multiple times the same thing that if, and it is a very big and fat if I get the evaluation results back in, then it is usually, thank you for participating, you didn't win, and that's it. And if I write, could you please be more detailed in order for us to improve in future, then there is A, no response at all, or B, we cannot give this information. And they do not give anything, like no price information, no points, no ranking, nothing. And it's really hard to motivate yourself for the future tenders to participate. So could you please define, you said that you have the obligation to respond and give feedback if this inquiry comes in. What kind of feedback? Is there by default somewhere written that you have to give in like this or that or like general info?
Unfortunately, this is, as you also have gathered, one of the areas in the UN that is very undefined. But it is also, I can encourage you, an area where they are looking at it. Because this is obviously not optimal, the way it is being done. So there is, and I can perhaps also give you a hint as to the people that really has the UN organization's ears, your missions, your country missions that are working with the UN. They have such impact. If they come as donors and as partners to the UN and say, you know what, this is not working for us, how are we going to look at addressing this? That really means a lot. And just like the whole issue around sustainability and now actually using it properly and also having impact when it comes to gender diversity and these kinds of things, that is where those things came from, where those topics was raised and who the people that were advocates for them. And there are many areas within the UN where we want to also do certain things, but then there are other factors that plays a role. And I'm not always sure, you know, not everywhere in the world transparency has the same good name. You know, in this part of the world where, you know, we are used to transparency, we are not corrupt by nature, you know, things are a little different. But in other areas, this may not be the best solution because it can also impact the market in a very different way. So, but as a starting point, you know, you shouldn't just leave it at that. Do escalate it. Do go back. Do complain. Mm-hmm. And I really hope that you don't lose interest in it altogether because we definitely also need the right kind of suppliers.
I definitely want.
That's good.
But we will be participating in the future for sure.
Mm-hmm. Very good. I'm happy to hear that. Yes. Absolutely.
Yeah. Mhm.
I will take this message home.
We have another question.
Okay. First of all, thank you for this opportunity, Tehnopol, and the explanations was pretty nice, pretty clear. And my name is Ronaldo from Brazil, and sorry about my English, but I'd like to know about this topic, about the size of budget. For example, if you have some examples of some projects that was very high budget than $50,000 of course. Can you explain to us to be a little bit clear this project of the real life, if possible, of course. Thank you. I don't know if you understand the point.
I have an idea where you are trying to go with this. So the only way I can potentially say to you that you can try and do this, because you know your sector, you know your competitors. So what you can do, remember when I showed you the procurement opportunities and I said to you, clear out the dates, clear out the ones that are active, and you would go, for example, I'm going to use her example because this is the one that I'm thinking, could be the easiest. And you go and you look at everything that was advertised for training. So you use the codes, for training material, for training. I think the categories are like technical training or, yeah, exactly. And you use those categories. And then you search for it. And then you can see, okay, there were these contracts in that particular year. You also have an idea as to which ones you participated in. And then you go and you use the annual statistical report for the year following the tenders. So if you participated in 2022, go and look at the report that was published for all the tenders. It was published in 23, but it was for the year before, and you know who are your competitors. Go and see if you can find those names of those companies, because they will give the name of the company and they will tell you which amount it was contracted for. And then that gives you an indication, what it was that they won and what was the value of it. Unfortunately, although our system allows the staff to make a direct link between posting a tender, posting a contract, posting a long-term agreement, and adding all the amounts in it, they are also not doing it in there. They only use it for the annual statistical report where they provide them with all the work because they are obligated from the General Assembly that they have to provide this information. But there's nothing that obligates them to provide that information as it stands today in other places. And that's why this kind of change needs to be driven from higher up. And it's not going to be driven from the UN agencies because it's not in their interest. It needs to be driven from the people that are providing them funding for their programs. And those are your missions. They are the ones. So they should come and say, you know what? We need to have this as a basic. This is how we do it in the EU. This is, how we do things. So get going. Because we can, in terms of the way we can do things in this world today, everything can be done, with literally almost the press of a button. If they put the information in there, we can send it out to you because we collect information already. We know how many people have participated in a tender, or said that they were interested in a tender, but we don't have the details because they are also not providing us with the details.
Okay, I think we have time for the last question. Yes.
Hello, my name is Alan, and I'm from the company Dionics. We provide IT services and solutions, and I've done tenders in the past, but not with the UN. And my issue was that the technical requirements were often either out of date or incomplete or factually incorrect. My question is therefore, how are the technical requirements evaluated, and how is the solution evaluated at the end of the tendering process?
I hear this, sadly, so often. And this is where I also want to encourage you that, yes, I mean, you need to, in order to be considered for a tender, you need to meet the minimum, even with their out-of-date requirements. But this is an opportunity for you to actually raise awareness that there are better options and help with the education on that side. It could also be worth it that you actually raise this as part of the clarification and saying, you see that this is what they're asking for, but the standard these days is this. And because you asked the question, they need to answer. And when they answer, they also have to provide that answer to other suppliers. And then you may very well get the response of, absolutely, nobody uses that anymore. And if you do use it, it's going to be, well, it is out of date. So, you know, you have to replace it very shortly. And this is not a good one. And then they may have to redo that process. But unfortunately, you know, the reality is that we are dealing with humans. And in procurement, we don't have experts for every area. But there are areas where, of course, we have experts. When it comes to medicines, when it comes to food, things where we can potentially kill people. There we have experts and groups of people. But when it comes to other things, like when it comes to vehicles, when it comes to IT, often, you know, it's like you go back to the last spec that I've seen, and that's really scary, knowing that how this world is changing. And, you know, slightly adapted or changed or, yeah. So, and then you can imagine that the evaluation may not have an expert, but that it is people that's just looking whether you are meeting the requirements or not. So, so yeah, unfortunately there I can also not defend it. But this could be an opportunity for you to educate, you know, and tell people about what is available, and also so they can see that this is not a price thing. You know, this is just that things have changed.
We are here today. A couple of weeks ago, everyone who's working with US money got no-stop order. UN organizations had a lot of US money. Most probably you also received a non-stop order. And now I don't know if I'm happy that I'm not your supplier that might have used US money, or I'm not. The question is, how are you protecting your implementers? Because the no-stop order, we got it from another source because we are also partly financed by US.
Yeah.
It's okay for us, but how do you protect your implementers who already have signed the contract? You told that you are paying almost certainly for 30% of time. What are you doing now with everyone who was funded by US?
Because one of the things that I have also said was, you are not allowed to start a project or procurement if you haven't secured the funds. The funds need to be in your hands, not in a promise, but in an account. So we are not seeing at this stage that we are impacting people that we have a current contract with. Yeah, that has not been an issue for us yet, right? Because that money was promised, that money is in place. But, of course, everything that we have planned or programs that we thought that we would have, this has a major implications, major. I mean, within the UN, I can tell you that we have already let people go, because if you were on a contract, certain types of contracts only have a 2-week notice. So people that were in positions that was funded by US aid, they were immediately given notice and they have gone. There are organizations where such a big part of their funding is reliant on those funds that they can perhaps function for another 2 months, 3 months. Of course, it also means that everybody needs to reprioritize and look as to how they are going to do things. So I also would imagine that in the near future, you will see many procurement processes, and I've actually saw some already today, where it was saying it's been cancelled. Mm-hmm. So that is what you're going to see. But if you have a contract, you will have your contract because the money was there. But now for the ones that's upcoming, I think that changes it. And although I personally really disagree with how things are done, I also hope that for the UN's sake, this is an opportunity for it to also take a serious look at how we do things and do it better.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I don't know if...
Here she comes with a gift she's not allowed to give.
Really? I can't give.
Well, what we usually do, let me tell you how it works.
Okay.
Absolutely. But, you know, there's always something that we do. So one of the things that we would do, and let me just tell you, it was not a ticket to Mauritius.
Yes. No
or a car. So what we would do with this is when I go back to the office, I put it in our raffle for Christmas.
Yay!
So thank you for your contribution. So we do these kinds of things. If we get cookies and things, then we are allowed to put it on the table so everybody can have it. We don't keep it for Christmas, but absolutely. But this is a very sweet token, and I accept it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yes. Now we will have a short break for approximately 20 minutes, and I hope to see you all back 12:30, and then hopefully we will be able to listen to a bit more positive experience with United Nations organization by Hille, our dear partner. Thank you, and have a short break.
Thank you, everyone.
And welcome back. Real life cases give the real inspiration and encouragement to take action. So I invite to the stage our good partner, Hille Hinsberg from Proud Engineers, and she will share their experience in working with the UN Development Programme. Please, Hille.
Thank you, Kristi. Tere.
Tere.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for the invitation, and thank you for this opportunity. As you heard from Susan, so it appears I'm one of the 272 registered vendors in the UNGM platform, but in reality, we are a small team of digital transformation consultants called Proud Engineers. Small team means a micro-enterprise of 10 people, 10 persons. And this is our Hall of Fame then, if you want. We have really been working with the UN-affiliated organization, and in that case, this is the UNDP, our United Nations Development Programme. And this slide hopefully gives you a picture of what type of business we have been able to provide to them and what kind of partner we are. Also, referring back to what Anumal said, we are consultants, meaning automatically that this is services that we provide. We do not provide software or hardware or anything that can be called products. And it also means that all of these tenders and all of these contracts are custom They cannot be really replicated in the sense that probably the next tenders will be something totally different, and we didn't have any chance to sort of make a standardized bid. But it's also a good thing. There's a positive side to it. So from this slide, you can see that we have been able to build on the already existing contact. And this is maybe sounding peculiar to you, but really the Turkmenistan office, you can see that we have done a request for proposals with them, but twice. First of all, making it to the final evaluation and then winning the contract for a sort of entry, the data exchange strategy, a roadmap, if I remember, and some capacity building or training. And then, of course, once you have already established the contact, it gets so much easier after that. So the second round, we did already a pilot project. Both of the contracts are approximately in the realm of the $50,000. That was the case for most of them. And I don't recall what was the category, because we didn't search for these, at least for the first two in the portal, but we were alerted that these tenders will be published in the portal. By whom? By the country office. So it's one of our main ways of getting to know what is happening, at least in this organization, to have a direct contact in the country offices. So it's my first advice to build them gradually. So the UNDP Nepal is sort of the same thing, digitalization strategy and roadmap. And this channel was UN roster of experts. So it's, yes, it's individual experts, but the individual expert can be sort of boosted or backed up or supported by this kind of small team that we have, or at least make some kind of collaborative work. And then we have also a very small contract with the UN Human Rights Council. Why I wanted to bring you this is that the channel is LinkedIn, literally. So it's very entry-level business, but again, with a hope that it opens up new opportunities. And from the yellow keywords that you see on the slide, you have probably understood what are our sort of unique selling points, or what are the keywords that we are able to provide, anything to do with data, exchange, the knowledge, how you set it up, especially in the health domain, and then the digital identities, the legal framework, the technical framework, the architecture. But LinkedIn, yes, it might sound funny, but once you get the invitation or an option to take part in an expert gathering that is moderated or collaborated or funded by a UN agency, this might be a very good option to actually get to know the scenery and the actors. So it's not to do with a tendering process knowledge, but to do with a content knowledge. Just for reference or for comparison, that we are not solely UN-oriented or focused, we do have a portfolio of other international organizations, and just to give you a comparison, that yes, we do have experience working with the World Bank, GIZ, European Commission, Team Europe, or any of the others, and the International Red Cross, which might be considered as one of the UN-affiliated organizations as well. So what I wanted to bring you is actually the sort of lived-in experience from our business, and the way that we consider really the experience to be worthwhile is what we think that we have acquired, even from these. They were counted 4, right? There are more in the pipeline, but I will not talk about them as yet. So we really sincerely believe that when you have made to the contract phase with any of the UN organizations, it will give you international sort of not only knowledge but credibility. And you can show it, of course, not only in our LinkedIn profile, but to the other tenderers as a reference point. So this might be a very good and valid reason to get into all this trouble to make the tender and to answer to these invitations. Definitely it has been able to diversify our geographical reach. When I showed you that Turkmenistan 2 pilots, we are active in Uzbekistan, we are interested and having contacts in the neighboring region, so it might open up other opportunities even in the region. And I think the other regions might be the same. Once you're in one country in the MENA region, North Africa and the Gulf, this gives you a reference for other ones. Absolutely gives expertise in various cultural context, yes, but also the regulatory. Also the way that procurement, the way that business is conducted, it gives you the first-hand knowledge, although, yes, it's time-consuming, definitely. A very wide range of topics. How to connect these topics? I need to say I find it pretty complicated in the UNGM portal, but really the selecting of the codes, be creative about it, because I think all of these contracts have been labeled as management and admin services, most probably, yes, but they can also be under research and science, they can be under innovation label, they can be under training, capacity building, and of course when we are into health domain, then there is a whole lot of keywords and codes to be searched from there. So you need to somehow pick the combination that might be relevant to your actual business. What we also need to stress is that, yes, as Susan said, it's a very reliable, very steady contract partner. And you are not left without payment, might be slow when you're working in Nepal and the invoices need to be sent to New York or whatever office that was responsible, but they do get you, they do respond and they do pay up finally. And as I already demonstrated, it gives you absolutely good opportunity to build up the follow-up projects. And being in the 10 minutes, I'm not going to repeat the benefits that we believe we are able to give to our partners. So the lessons learned, I already mentioned the references, but I think a good proving ground or evidence for tender applications in any other settings. As you saw, we are working with different multilateral organizations and directly with country counterparts. So that brings to the second point, that it's absolutely essential for a micro team like us to work with partners. And especially, of course, local businesses with lots of local knowledge, the contacts, the culture, the legal context, but mainly to be very open, hooking up with the right people and right companies to make sort of a bid for something larger than you are able to provide. And this has been very useful and valuable for us in actually winning tenders. So not only the ones who are locally based and have the regional reach, but also working with partners in Estonia. One of the lessons learned is that it might get very long chain when there are mediators or facilitators. So happy to partner up, but the negative side is that if the chain gets too long, then the decision making, of course, gets complicated, and that includes also the procurement side. So there might be country, let's say policymaker or government agency or a corporation who is interested to buy you, to work with you, But then in order to get the funding and in order to get the tender going, they need to work with a whole chain of command in their country and then ask for funding and then wait for it, and then it gets complicated for them, although they already know that this is a circle of partners and a circle of services they really want to procure. As I said, UNDP is a very good partner in the sense that they are not restricted to wait until the end when you have completed the contract to pay up, but they do interim payments, which is, as you can understand, for a small company, absolute priority to maintain the cash flow and not put or make a loan and then put your own money to the work and to carry the partners as well. One lesson learned is really, I think Susan ended with that, is patience and pertinence. So it's a very slow build-up. Again, the caveat is that Estonian companies being very small, none of us has a dedicated personnel or staff to do the tendering all the time and only tendering, to only be the one person regularly checking the portal. You need to rotate these duties and do it sort of besides your expertise or your other jobs. So making contact is time consuming, but we get to the recommendations in the panel discussion, it's worthwhile. There are blind spots as well, so you need to talk to a lot of persons to actually get to the right ones. So to close up and then be ready for the discussion and your questions at first, I think the first and foremost channel for us has been country offices. And while I have visited the two opportunities in Geneva and in Copenhagen to visit with multiple contact persons in very many UN organizations, you still need to get to the human level and get to know people who have the urgency of getting something done. I know it's easier said than done, but these are the persons that would really get you the business and the contracts in the final end. And so I learned that actually in UNDP, the country offices matter, so they make the most of the volume in terms of tendering. But yes, the portal is very good. To check regularly what is going on. Yes, you saw from Susan that you need to filter through headings and titles in French, Spanish, German, and I don't know what else. But then you sort of train yourself to spot what might be the actual keywords that you recognize to be important for you. And the last bit is, again, meant as a joke for us that are very, very accustomed exactly with the Estonian public procurement portal to make everything happen all at once and in digital way. But you need to get used to even providing a stamp, which I think we had probably 30 years ago. And now we're talking about e-seals and, whatever ways to prove your identity and documents. But you really need to play the game as the rules are in perhaps other ways. Okay, and I think that's it from me. And I hope I have been in time.
Yes, couple of questions. Yes.
Thank you a lot. Congratulations having two country offices like Turkmenistan and Nepal. And we know that our competence often is needed in the smaller countries. So in the bigger countries, we are not just competitive. Again, as my big puzzle is to try to understand two things. One of the things is that if you say that your projects are within the limit of 50,000, are they pretty much the similar? And the question is also that in these two countries, do you have the similar daily rate for the consultants, or is it different? Is it higher in Nepal or Turkmenistan, or vice versa, and why?
Very short answer, it is the same daily rate. Yeah.
And you use the locals as part of the team, or Estonians or internationals?
Not for those UN contracts. This is purely Estonian knowledge.
Okay, so you take the Estonian, and how does it feel compared to Estonian prices? How much cheaper are you? Are you like half price or the same price?
We are not cheaper at all. So
the same price?
Yes.
Okay, and just the volume is around 50,000.
Mm-hmm. But I think in these cases, we really kind of got the information, what is the maximum limit.
Oh, really?
So what is actually the budget volume that is going to be sought out.
Okay, but this makes it so much easier to do the service accordingly. Okay. Does your contact, are you online only, or do you need to travel to Turkmenistan and Nepal?
You do need to travel. Yeah,
within this 50,000, you need to have your traveling of the experts
at least
to the country.
For once. Yeah, I think in Nepal there was one person and he went twice.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So these are not big volume, large scale enterprises that we are talking about, but the word is built up one from the next. So when you have feet on the ground, then you're definitely, in much better state than start all the tendering and bidding process from the very start.
Laur Mägi from Helmes. How was the feedback when you won the tender? Were you given more details for Animal?
Honestly, I didn't myself. I wasn't behind the presenting the tenders, so I don't recall the team talking about what was the feedback like. Like, did they detail the points or something like that? I can't recall. So I'm not sure which way it was. Was it only the decision, like you have been selected a winner, or was it somewhat more fragmented?
But the time is up. We will have also networking opportunities after the keynote and panel discussion. But right now, we will have our last keynote speaker, Triinu Kallas. She is responsible for the economic and consular affairs at the Embassy of Estonia in Copenhagen. Triinu will introduce us to the opportunities UN international procurements offer. Triinu, the floor is yours.
It's so good to be here and see so many interested people in UN procurement. So I really hope that the number goes up on the UNGM portal now after Susan's introductions, how to do it. So I'm Triinu Kallas. I am a diplomat. Been a diplomat for 20 years and currently working at the Estonian Embassy in Copenhagen. As said, I do have many tasks there. We have a small embassy, so but what is relevant here today is my business diplomacy hat. So I'm there to support the Estonian companies to find and explore new avenues, mainly on the Danish market, but also more globally, as we experienced last year with the UN International Procurement Seminar that we organized. And that is also the reason why I am here talking about it. I'm not a procurement specialist, I'm not a UN specialist, but I was part of the organizing team for the seminar that we had in Copenhagen last year. So before I go into what we did last year in Copenhagen, I would like to just share some general overview of what this format entails. It is a format adopted by the UN, so it's the same format for all the UN member states that want to organize one. The modalities that are valid now were adopted in 2019 after they piloted it for a 2 years period. But the aim of the modalities is to make these seminars more cost-effective and bringing more added value to both sides, so the vendors and the buyers. So I've outlined some of the concept main points here. So it is foreseen by the UN that such seminars takes place ideally 3 times a year, and this should be organized by a number of member states together, ideally at least 3 member states, but it could be more as well. And they also have given some structure to it, how they foresee that this should be built up and where this could be held. And here also the UNGM portal plays a crucial role because this is the main platform that is used for communicating with the UN agencies and also the buyers participating. And this is the platform where they agree upon the one-to-one meetings to be held during the seminar as well. So the main aim with these procurement seminars is to provide a platform where the buyers from the UN agencies and the vendors can meet in person, so they can share information, learn about how the procurement processes are done by the UN agencies, what is expected upcoming years maybe, and what are the specific requirements for some of these agencies. So coming to our event, we organized it together with Belgium and France, and from the Estonian side, so it was the Embassy and Enterprise Estonia in collaboration. For Estonia, it was the 2nd time to organize such a seminar. First time was in January 2021, but due to COVID restrictions, it was a fully virtual event then, so it didn't really bring all the benefits that we saw last year. And why these countries? It's just, I could say also a coincidence that these are the countries that were interested in organizing a seminar at that point of time. In 2021, we had a bigger group. We had also Austria, Germany, France, Spain, and Portugal. So Belgium was not part of that group then. And what we did, we took the concept of the UN-given procurement seminar concept, and we built up our event on 2 days. So the first day was a full day of presentations and panel discussions in the auditorium, where all the participating UN agencies could present their procurement plans and what they usually do buy and what they need and so on. And we did also have some panel discussions on selected topics like sustainability, that Susan also mentioned, that is an important part of the tenders nowadays. We talked about the health and pharmaceuticals, as this is the biggest thing that the UN agencies buy, and so on. We did have 10 UN agencies participating, and as the format foresees, it is up to the organizers to make sure that all the UN agency representatives can come and be present at the place. So we had people coming from all over the country. So it's also a tricky thing, I think, to find out where the buyers are actually located, because they might not be where the head office of the organization is. So for WHO, for example, that is located in Geneva. We had a person coming in from Budapest, so it could be a surprise to the organizers where they come from. The second day we had smaller workshops. We had companies presenting their experience, like we heard here right now before me. And we also had a workshop from the UN side, where the agency told about what kind of vendors they would like to see in participating in the tender, so a bit of practical tips sharing. But the most important part of these seminars is still the one-to-one meetings, and these we had during both of the 2 days, parallel to all the other sessions, the presentations, and so on. So we had about 100 companies participating from all the 3 countries, and we organized around 300 one-to-one meetings for them. So it's the UN, as I said, it's the UNGM portal that is used for these meetings. And when the companies sign up to participate at a seminar like this, they can express their interest in meeting the UN agencies that are coming to that event. And the UN agencies are then going through all the meeting requests on that portal, and they can either accept or decline the meetings. So it's kind of a strict process as well, similar to the procurement process with the deadlines that cannot be missed, and if you miss it, then you're out. So it's a good opportunity for the companies, but it needs some homework and also to keep to the deadline, so that is important. And what our online or fully virtual event couldn't provide was the networking that we had last year in Copenhagen. I think from the feedback we got from the companies, this was maybe also one of the most important parts. And not only meeting the UN agency people, but also meeting the other companies, both from your own country and also from the other countries participating. So you could build a network, because in many tenders, as you also heard, that you need to offer a kind of full package. So sometimes you cannot do it yourself, but you need to have help, and then it's good to have some knowledge of other companies that are interested in working with the UN. So that's it from my side, and I'm open to questions.
Hello, my name is Katrin and I'm from Nordic Production Group. I was actually one of the participants of last year in Copenhagen, and I already asked Katrin, and Katrin told me that you do not plan to do a similar event this year. Can you give a little feedback why? I would like it very much.
Yes, well, it's kind of a heavy project. We started planning for it almost a year before, when we tried to connect with other possible countries that would be interested in doing that. And actually 9 months before we had the seminar, we really started to putting together the application to host this seminar, because all states need to apply for it, and there are certain criteria that the UN goes through when deciding whom to give the right to organize this seminar. And there are 3 seminars per year, usually. It's heavy work. It's a big budget, and we cannot do it every year. And I don't think that we would be granted the right to do it either, because, as said, everybody should get the right to organize it, and there are countries that are interested. I just checked the UNGM website actually has the information about the seminars that have been held, and they have a calendar of about 1 year ahead as well, I think. So you can see on the UNGM portal, I think, when you go and see doing business with the UN, and there is this knowledge shelter, then the doing business with the UN, and there is this international procurement seminar site. I checked that, and I think the Nordics are organizing now again this year, and they had in 2023. So there is 2 years apart. So we cannot do it this year. We are thinking about doing it again, but I cannot promise that it will be next year. Rather, I think 2027, maybe.
Thank you. I'm from Enterprise Estonia. Just maybe for everyone's interest, can you mention why Copenhagen? Why this place out of all the options?
Yes, well, Copenhagen, I think partly we had some guidance from colleagues before who did the virtual event, but also because there is a kind of hub for UN agencies there in Copenhagen, as Susan also mentioned. And there are some organizations, and UNDP is largely based in Copenhagen. They have their buyers there as well. So it was good. For us, it was a good choice. I mean, it's possible to organize it also other places, of course. It depends on which agencies you would like to invite, I think. Because for us, almost half of the agencies we invited were present in Copenhagen, so it brings down a little bit of your budget. And you have more, because if you bring in people from other places, you cannot bring like 10 people. You have the limits. But for example, UNDP, being in Copenhagen, they had several experts at place. So it was, in that sense, it made sense to make it in Copenhagen. And this is one of the recommendations from the UN as well, that you do it in regional hubs, or so to say.
Do we have more questions? No? Everything is clear. Great. In that case, we will have a panel discussion. It's very intriguing topic, because I understand that all the companies, all the applicants should be treated equally. How to stand out in the situation when you actually are not allowed to stand out. So it's very interesting and close to my heart, because I'm a marketeer and strong believer in brand building. So but at the same time, I understand that half of the win comes from understanding the process. So perhaps, Susan, you can elaborate more about the process. What happens after I have pushed the button, submit, and sent out my offer? What's the process after that? I understand that definitely important is expertise, experience, but what else?
Yes, so now this is also easier to answer, because now we have gone and you've actually decided that you wanted to engage with the UN by also submitting a tender. And there, it is very difficult to stand out if your price is not right. So that is a very important starting point, is that the price is one of the areas that we consider. And of course, a very important part of it. But also, if you are providing the documentation in a way that actually facilitates our work, you get a very different idea of who you are dealing with when you open an envelope and everything is very neat and there are labels and you can see what is what. You can see that there's a checklist. They have ticked off that they have had everything signed and stamped where it was supposed to be signed and stamped. And you can actually see that they have followed a process. And the documents are presented in the right language, and there's some additional documentation that you can also look at, and it's very clear. I think this is such a very basic way of standing out. Then when you open, because I've also, in my earlier years, sat on bid evaluation in a committee where you also, it would be the procurement staff that's opening it, but they need to have some witnesses that will make sure that the numbers that are written down and the names, and there's nothing untoward happening in the room. Where if you open something, and firstly when it's a RFP, where you are supposed to keep your financial information separate from your technical solution, and the first thing that happens is they are in two transparent little files, so you can immediately see what the price is. That bit needs to be thrown out. That's terrible. So, things like that. When you open something and everything falls out and you're not sure, what is the sequence of this? So it is so extremely basic things that can make you stand out at that stage. But I think your real opportunity to shine comes when you actually have won a contract. Because that is one thing, as you can also hear, is that if we find that a vendor is easy and good to work with, it is somebody that we will advise our colleagues to also reach out to when they have a tender. It's somebody that we will also let know. And now I also have to also tell you who's it that lets you know. And I hope that you don't contradict me in this, is it's not the procurement staff that will let you know. It's the program staff that will let you know. Because in the UN, we make a separation. Somebody was asking me earlier also about, but we would like to know what is going to happen. That was the one question. The other question was, somebody told me that you know what you're going to do a year in advance, so why do you publish the tender 2 weeks in advance? Because they come from different areas. In the UN, we have these two groups. You have the programming people, and then you have procurement. And these two are separated. So there's no conflict of interest. But it also means that things become super complicated. And the program people, they are the ones that you can actually ask to meet with. If you are working with an NGO or somebody else already, or in a country where you have something that you think could be of value to the UN, you can actually ask to meet with program people to go and show them what you have. Because they don't have the same conflict of interest when it comes to suppliers. Because they don't have influence at that stage over what it is and who are we going to buy it from. And once they know what they will need, they will then tell the procurement people, okay, in order to have this program, we would need these goods and these services. And then that goes in a totally different area. And the procurement staff are the ones that will basically do the requirements. And if they were not given clear instructions from the program people as to what kind of budget and what it is that we would like to do and how sophisticated or unsophisticated it has to be, they will go with what they then have. But so program people, they are good people for you to deal with. Because they don't have the same strict rules that they have on the procurement side. So I'm not sure if I now answered that.
So yeah, these are exactly the persons that you need to find. It doesn't mean that you need to travel around Turkmenistan and Nepal for that. But they usually are somewhere out there. They come to the European Commission conferences and forums. They even come to Tallinn Digital Summit in our field of activity. And so it's a simple, or they come through AES, our Enterprise Estonia, or our MFA, and they just are part of a delegation. And then it's a matter of going and turning the button and telling them what it is that you do. And Lord knows it doesn't happen immediately after that, but perhaps 2 or 3 years after that, somebody has this urgency that they really need to start building up their digital identity framework, and then is your chance to make an entry.
But it was actually very interesting. I understand that there is like two groups of people, but how do, like at some point, when do they communicate? Like, I understand that the procurement people check that everything is in order, that there are no missing documents, whatever, and then, but they don't actually evaluate the content of the offer.
No, they do, also evaluate, but they usually have a technical expert that will then come, or part of the program team will then also come and say, okay, yes, this can work or this can't work. So at that stage in the evaluation, we have a combination. But the procurement team will also be there because they are the ones that's very focused on the price and the procedure and, you know, that part of the project. While the program people make sure that this is actually something that will meet the needs.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you for clarifying. Question to you, Triinu. What is your experience regarding supporting companies? I understand that you haven't had the actual opportunity to support, but to advise, perhaps.
Yeah, well, I haven't had any companies actually coming to me and asking about UN procurement. So, but of course, supporting companies otherwise on the Danish market, it's a daily job. But I know that colleagues at the UN, our representations to the UN, they have been dealing with it, and I mean they can support companies with contacts or finding information and so on. But it's important that the companies have done their homework as well, that they know what they are asking, what they need. Because for the diplomats, it's just one part of the work, and they cannot know what is really for that company, what is needed. So it is important that the companies can really come with their concrete needs, what they need help with, and of course our diplomats are there to support, to open the doors, to find the contacts or information or whatever is needed. So
correct me if I'm wrong, but maybe you also know about our representation in Geneva. I think I remember that based in Geneva there are at least 52 UN offices, headquarters, and our representation works with 15 of them, having close kind of contacts. It doesn't mean that they cannot reach out to the others, but really the scope that is actually realistic capability to go and be part of the regular information exchange is quite limited. So if you as a company has a very specific target, they will be able to help you. But if you say, oh, we are a digitalization company, give me the contacts, that's certainly not going to work.
Yeah, actually in Geneva, yes, we do have a limited number of organizations that we work with, but this is on subject matter basis, so it's not like a business diplomacy work that we do there mainly, but we do have a diplomat, but she's not based in Geneva, but in Zurich, but she does help companies also, and she was the one organizing also the event in Geneva, so she is the contact point to do the business contacts, and even if we do not work daily with the organization that the company is interested in, we do maybe know the people whom to go to and ask for contact. So it's still worth trying and then contacting the diplomats there and seeing if they can support you with
so
the
you
information.
would be the key to the network.
Of course, all the diplomats. That's why we are out there.
Yes. And I can perhaps add one of the things that we have seen diplomats is when there's a bid opening, for example, and you shouldn't have to fly to, although Copenhagen is a very easy place to fly to, but you don't need to come there personally, but you can also send a representative from the embassy to come to a bid opening, and they can take notes of the information, and then they can actually share it with you. And as I mentioned, that is the only time during a bid opening where you will hear who are the other companies and what they are offering. so that is a very valuable time. The other thing that you can also do is a trade promotion entity. So that's not something that you can do as a supplier, but it can be done by our other colleagues here, is if you have an innovative product, a truly innovative product, then they can actually add it to the site. So when we have UN staff that's looking for a solution, they actually go and look in that innovation portal and they can see some of the products or services that are available that is considered innovative. And some agencies are also further along in sort of like really working with innovation, while others are a little more standoffish and old-fashioned when it comes to it. But it's also an area where we see that there's movement.
Mm-hmm. But let's get now more practical. Let's imagine that I have a startup, technology-based startup. I have an amazing idea. The idea is to provide opportunity to sign documents digitally. How would I approach you? Like how to stand out? I understand that I have to create the profile at the portal, but after that, are there specific events where I should go? I understand that I have to check also the information if something new is procured, put myself up there as innovative solution, but in addition to that, what else can I do?
That's one of those very difficult questions.
Sorry.
Because in essence, I often, on the help desk in UNGM, we get comments from vendors that says, now I've been signed up for 2 years and I haven't heard anything from you. Yeah, you're also never going to hear from us because we work in public procurement. Mm-hmm. So we only hear from you when you participate in a tender. But of course, there is the opportunity, as she's also said to you, where you can go out to all kinds of events that may be organized by, there are also these big trade shows. Mm-hmm. Sometimes the UN actually also managed to participate in that. So it could be a way to approach people there. You can always go and have a look and see in old tenders who was the contact, and then send them some information that was not solicited. And you may just get to the right kind of person, that looks at this and say, I must remember this one. And then the day when it comes, because that you also heard is that people are contacted outside of the system. And yes, this happens because like everybody else, UN staff also Googles. So when they can't find the vendor in the portal, because it's not a requirement that this is the only place where you're allowed to find people, they will also use those ways to find potential suppliers. So also if you have a website, make sure that there's some English on it as well, because that makes it so much easier for people to find the information and to find you. And I know personally also from the business seminars, meeting with suppliers, and although in UNGM we don't buy anything, where there was discussion later about some marketing, mm-hmm. where I could say, but you know what, I met somebody and here's their details. So it also works that way. And then program staff, they're going to thank me for this. They are the people that you need to find out, what are they planning, mm-hmm. What are they potentially going to buy, because the procurement staff, there's so many rules around actually being able to meet with them.
Mm-hmm. My advice would be for a startup, even in technological field, if you're able to present a bid, to go through tender in our Estonian public procurement mm-hmm. system, then you have the capability to do the same with the UN or with any other multilateral international organizations. But they are not procuring your product or service. they are procuring something that they need to do. So finding the exact
Link.
or not exact, but close enough match. This is the product or the service I got, but what are they looking after? Is, I think, one of the key words. Just to tell, I don't know if anyone from Salvest is here, but they were, I think, in Copenhagen with us. And they, of course, they have wonderful products. They produce packaged food. And I don't know if they've actually made the tendering process or they were considering, but it was not food products that was the label. It was something in the refugee camp relief and assistance services.
Yes.
For people who are humbling experience for them to be somewhere in the middle of desert with absolutely nothing. So they, if they could repackage their products to be part of the relief package, then they would be able to enter this kind of procurement process, perhaps with partners. But this is exactly the way how you need to think. This is when I have a startup, I'm wonderful and I'm doing wonderful things. This might not be the exact way that these organizations need your work.
I would say it's like typical everyday marketing, that you get to know the target audience, you get to know what are the playground rules, and then you follow them and try to find this product market fit. I have a question. Do you have some specific events where I definitely should participate? Like, I don't know, there is some annual event where all the information is given out, or just my own field events and seek from the speaker list or participants?
Yeah, I would say that it's just, as Susan earlier said as well, UN is just a client. So you need to do your homework yourself. You need to go mingle, network, and you never know where you can find the right person that is exactly what you were looking for. And it takes time. You need to have patience, and you need to set a target that now I'm doing this, and you need to commit to it. It's not just like you're waiting, like, no, I did the profile, I'm waiting 2 weeks, I went to one event and no results, so that's it. It doesn't work like this. UN is a big machinery, you could say, so it takes time once you gain this visibility and you reach the right persons that you need. So I think it's just looking at the participants list at any event. I mean, UN has a lot of people all around the world attending different events, being speakers at the trade fairs, whatever. So you just need to go around and find them.
So the recommendation is do something that every other Estonian hates and fears the most?
Yes.
Talk to other people. Okay, thank you. That's easy.
I think that's a myth, because when people are in the business and they have at least part of the position being in sales or business development or whatever you call it, director of the universe or whatever your title might be, that you need to do it aside of your usual kind of tasks and duties. But I would also recommend, if you are not feeling so secure or so assured of your own capabilities, to really turn to organizations who are there to help, well, starting from your diplomats, but also the specialized companies. I think Katrin is representing one, who know exactly the guts, how the process works and what are the tricks of the trade, and how to even fill in the right type of information in the right spot. And so we have done it, not for the UN, but for the other multilaterals, and certainly for the European Commission. And it has really helped to overcome the barrier. So once you sort of absorb this knowledge, then perhaps in the further life you are able to do it on your own.
Experience, definitely. Susan, question to you. Does UN prioritize working with companies from specific countries or regions? No.
No,
Everyone
not at
equal.
all. Not at all. And it's one of the basic principles of fairness. No, we don't. Although you will see with the sustainability criteria that you will see from time to time in a tender where they say that one of the things that they are taking into consideration is where goods or services are coming from. So, you know, but in terms of like, we like people from this country and that country, no. But obviously, you know, there are certain things we should buy closer and not having it imported from, you know, far away. Another area where there's been a lot of focus in recent years is that of gender equality. So some of the agencies have actually started programs that was very specifically looking at women-owned businesses. So it's also one of the boxes that you can tick when you register is, do you have more than 51% of the management in your company are those women? And then that could be a criteria that within, but they are very upfront about this. They are saying that this project is focused towards that. So if you have a small difference in the price, the one that is woman-owned is the one that will get the contract. So that is also a very important factor to mention. You know, when you are participating in tenders, this is some good knowledge. So go and familiarize yourself with the sustainability criteria and the framework that they are working. All the information is on UNGM, and actually see what is important for them. Because when you can also display that in the additional information by saying, in my company, we have a policy when it comes to, you know, women, there's equal pay. Things like disability inclusiveness. You know, on UNGM, one of the things that we had to do as one of the first UN websites is we had to make sure that this could be read by machines, that the buttons were in a particular way, that it would be easy for somebody with a disability to actually use the site. So all those kinds of things, if you can also demonstrate that, if you can demonstrate that you have a, you know, responsible environmental policy, all those things are in, you know, in your benefit to be able to do.
Thank you. I would hate to take the opportunity for the audience to ask also questions. So, yes, our favorite question asker.
I have one comment, two questions, and maybe you can just choose which one you would like to answer. For the first, when we have new president in United States, we all learned very quickly that now everyone needs to have the merit-based work order. And this is the only way how we can continue working with US money. So it seems to be that every international organization needs to find a good balance with the donors. And that's why my next question. I think Kristi was very wisely asking about that part of the marketing is about the process, and it was really well described. But I always wondered, how does the money move before it comes to the tendering? Let's say you apply, UNDP applies for money, and you receive 10 million from EU delegation in Armenia to develop their, I don't know, democracy or entrepreneurship. What happens next? And when and how much is going to be tendered, or how the procedure goes? Because the tendering, what we see, is a very small part from all the 10 million. So what is happening there? This is just big curiosity.
Yeah, also a difficult one to answer. But in essence, the priorities for the UN is decided at a much higher level. So it's also not necessarily that UNDP will apply for the money. The UN organizations are very seldom the ones that's driving the agenda. The agenda comes from the government and from society. Yeah. You know, so there are some areas where our focus will automatically be. Our focus will automatically be on children, on health, on ensuring everybody has food, And then when you have these countries where democracy is an issue, then of course there's other things that plays a role. And there would be a program that would be developed, looking at where are we now and where do we want to be. And then depending on that, there would be different things. So you may see procurement, which may not be the only procurement, but it may be the procurement for now until the next step is implemented where there would be other procurement. So you may see now for consultants, and then later you may see some digital something, and then later you will see, okay, but now there's ballot boxes, and now we are preparing for an election. So there are different components that are involved in this. And that's where a procurement plan is really helpful. And some of the agencies are better at providing procurement plans than others. I know UNOPS is one of the agencies that are quite good with their procurement plans because they need to do it because they are actually not getting funding in the same way as UNDP and UNICEF. They really have to have a government or another UN organization that says you need to help us. And they need to have a plan in place before they can even get to the funding. Where many of the other organizations, they are basically receiving some standard funding. And they have been receiving more or less the same amount for years on end. So those are also the organizations where you now will see a major crisis. So for UNOPS personally, it wasn't a huge thing because they only had, I think, 30 or 50 million that was tied to US aid. But of course, those were also processes that was already in the process. And there's also procurement that has been started and where you don't know, if anything else is going to happen. So do you continue with a contract now, not knowing if you can actually finish that? Are we now buying things that we will have to store or using expertise for things that's never going to really materialize? So that has put many organizations in a really difficult place at the moment.
And how often is that the annual plans of the project are changing considerably during the project time? Or is it pretty often so that what you planned during the first year, you will do during the next couple of years? Is this the way, or is it always like you have a new plan for new year?
No, it's not a new plan every year. Because many of the projects that we are working on is things that's often ongoing. It's more the odd thing that is only for a short period of time and something that we need to do now. It's often part of something bigger, longer term. But of course, those plans should be updated on an annual basis so you can see what is still outstanding and then take it from there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Do we have more questions? Yes.
Okay, my question goes to Susan. Yeah, Susan, during your presentation, you mentioned duplication a lot on the UNGM side. So, like for myself now, when I saw the advert about this, so I registered as individual contractor. So, but I talked to my boss about it. He's away. So, if he comes back and we want to register as a company using my same email, without in any way amount to duplication?
You can only use an email address once. Mm-hmm. So in your case, and also because it's so limited what you can participate in, it would be good to reach out to us and we can delete that individual account and then you can create a supplier company account using that same email address.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay, I think, do we have last question? No, the time is up. Actually, we will have some time for networking as well. So if you have questions, you can approach everyone personally and ask questions. Thank you so much for coming and listening and being active and asking questions. Thank you so much, our dear keynotes. It has been very valuable, practical, and interesting. Thank you.
You're welcome.